The galaxy had always believed in rules. Not written ones, physical truths, the kind that even empires could not bend. Ships did not appear without jump signatures. Space did not skip. Energy could not simply vanish and reappear elsewhere. Every civilization, from the smallest moon colonies to the vast Triarch coalition, built their entire understanding of reality on those foundations. Until the moment those foundations stopped working. It began in the outer edge of coalition-controlled space, where patrol fleets monitored empty lanes between star systems. A routine shift, boring, predictable, safe. Then the sensors went blind. Not damaged, not jammed. Just empty. Every detection system across 3 patrol cruisers simultaneously reported the same impossible reading. Nothing. No heat. No mass distortion. No electromagnetic signature. And yet, something was there. At first, the bridge crew assumed a malfunction. That was easier, simpler. Machines failed, systems glitched. Reality did not. Recalibrate passive scan arrays, Commander Valen ordered, his voice calm but tight. I want redundancy checks across all bands. Seconds passed. Then the junior analyst spoke, hesitating. Sir, recalibration confirms it. A pause. Confirms what? The analyst swallowed. There is an object inside formation range. Silence spread across the bridge like a slow infection. Valen leaned forward, visual. A technician engaged external feeds. At first there was nothing, just starfield, cold, endless space. Then the image sharpened slightly, as if reality itself was reluctantly allowing it to be seen. And there it was. A warship. But calling it a ship felt wrong. It did not resemble coalition engineering. Not even alien design. It was something else entirely, angular yet fluid, massive yet quiet, like a piece of darkness carved into structure. Its hull absorbed light instead of reflecting it, making it impossible to judge its size accurately. The longer one looked at it, the more uncomfortable it became. The mind struggled to categorize it. Several crew members instinctively looked away, rubbing their eyes as if the image itself caused strain. No registry, someone whispered. Unknown faction, another suggested. But Valen already knew the answer forming in his gut. This was not a faction. This was an absence of history. Send hails, he ordered. A standard message was transmitted. Unidentified vessel, you are in restricted coalition space. Identify yourself immediately and prepare for inspection. The response was instant, but not through the communication system. Every screen across the fleet flickered white. Even systems not linked to external communication. Internal diagnostics, maintenance displays, even personal data pads, flashed simultaneously. Then the message appeared. We hear you. No transmission source. No frequency band. No traceable origin. It was simply present. Commander Valen felt something shift in his chest. Not fear yet, not fully, but something close enough that his instincts began shouting over his training. This is an intrusion attack, he said quickly. Electronic warfare protocol, seal all external links. Sir, the analyst interrupted again, voice shaking now. It's not coming through any channel. What do you mean? It's inside the system. The bridge went silent. Even the hum of machinery seemed quieter. Valen turned slowly back to the external feed. The ship had moved. Not in any recorded trajectory, not through space as understood. It had simply changed position. One moment it was stationary at the edge of the formation. The next. It was centered within the patrol fleet. Perfectly, like it had always been there. Alarms erupted across every ship in the squadron. Defensive formations scrambled. Weapons powered up with trembling urgency. Pilots shouted across comms, trying to re-establish structure in chaos. But Valen did not move, because he saw something no one else had focused on yet. The ship was not threatening them. It was observing them. Not targeting, not locking weapons, not preparing firing solutions. Just watching, like a predator studying unfamiliar prey behavior. Then came the second realization. The fleet's weapon systems were not responding correctly. Targeting reticles drifted away from the ship, as if refusing to acknowledge its existence. Automated defenses failed to lock. Fire control AI returned error loops with no explanation. "Why can't we target it?" someone shouted. No one answered. Because no one knew. Then the ship turned. Slowly, deliberately, revealing more of its impossible structure. Vast surfaces folded within surfaces, geometry that should not exist in three-dimensional space. Several crew members began bleeding from the nose, overwhelmed by the visual contradiction alone. And then, the message came again. This time not as text, but as understanding. Direct, unfiltered. Every mind on every ship received the same thought at once. You are not alone in noticing. Commander Valen finally felt it then. True fear, because whatever this was, it had not entered their space. It had been aware of it long before they were. And as the unknown warship began to shift once more, its form subtly unfolding like something waking from a long sleep, Valen realized the worst part was not its power. It was the certainty that this meeting was not accidental. It had been expected, and somewhere deep in the void between stars, something was still arriving. Panic in the patrol fleet did not begin as chaos. It began as denial. Commander Valen's first instinct was control. Every trained officer in the coalition knew the doctrine. When facing unknown contact, assert dominance quickly, decisively, and with overwhelming force if necessary. Unknowns became threats if allowed to persist. But doctrine assumed physics still behaved normally. It assumed ships could be targeted. It assumed enemies could be understood. None of those assumptions survived the next 60 seconds. Target the vessel, Valen ordered sharply. All weapons, focus fire pattern Sigma 9. I want full dispersal across its projected mass. Sir, targeting systems are not locking, a weapons officer replied, voice rising. It's like it's not registering as a physical object. That's impossible, Valen snapped. And yet it was happening across all three patrol cruisers. Missile locks failed. Beam arrays refused alignment. Automated defense grids spun in slow recalibration loops, as if confused by the concept of what they were looking at. Then the unknown warship moved again. No acceleration curve, no thrust signature. It simply changed position. One moment inside the fleet's formation. The next, behind them, perfectly centered in blind space where no ship should ever be. A technician screamed, "It's behind us." That was when someone fired anyway. A single cruiser, the Ralkesh, panicked. Its captain bypassed safety protocols and unleashed a full volley, plasma lances, kinetic rail slugs, gravity disruptors. The attack lit up space like a dying sun. For a moment, it looked like victory. Then the light faded, and nothing had changed. The human warship remained untouched. Not a single scorch mark, not a flicker of displacement, not even heat distortion around its hull. It had not defended itself. It had not been struck. It had simply ignored the attack. A silence fell across all channels. Then came the failure. The Ralkesh went dark. Not destroyed, not exploding. Just silent. Its engines shut down mid-burn. Weapons froze in active state. Life support flickered but stabilized at minimal survival thresholds. The entire ship drifted like a dead weight in space, powerless but intact. "Reports," Valen demanded. "Systems offline," came multiple overlapping voices. No damage readings, no breach events, everything just stopped responding. Another cruiser fired in response, fear overriding discipline, then another, and another. Soon the patrol fleet had broken formation entirely, firing wildly at a target no system could properly define. But every attack yielded the same result. Nothing. The human ship remained unchanged. Unmoved. Uninterested. Then, for the first time, it responded. Not with weapons. Not with movement. But with silence that became communication. Every screen across every coalition vessel flickered again. A second message appeared. You are escalating without comprehension. And this time it was followed by something worse. A map, not of space, but of their fleet. Every ship was displayed in perfect three-dimensional alignment, including internal structural layouts, crew positions, and power routing pathways. It was not a scan. It was awareness rendered as data. How do they have that level of detail? Someone whispered. No one answered, because the question was no longer relevant. The map updated. Several ships were highlighted, then dimmed, and one by one those ships lost power. No explosions, no combat damage, just systems shutting down in precise, controlled sequence, as if an unseen hand was gently turning them off. Panic turned into terror. Pull back, Valen shouted. But retreat orders meant nothing when navigation systems failed to respond. The human warship finally moved again. Slowly, it rotated toward them, not aggressively but deliberately, like something deciding whether to continue an experiment. And then it sent a final message. This is not resistance. This is correction. Valen felt his throat tighten. Correction, not battle, not war. Correction implied imbalance, error, something that needed fixing. And in that moment, Commander Valen understood the terrifying truth forming in the void ahead of them. They were not fighting an enemy. They were being evaluated by something that believed itself right. And as the remaining coalition ships drifted powerless, their systems frozen one by one, the unknown warship began to drift forward, slowly closing distance, while every surviving officer realized the same horrifying question. If this was only correction, then what did punishment look like? It did not take long for the coalition fleet's distress signal to reach the wider galaxy. But distress signal was an understatement. What arrived across subspace channels, relay stations, and ancient communication pylons was fragmented panic, broken transmissions, corrupted logs, and half-screamed reports of systems shutting down without cause. At first, most empires dismissed it. The galaxy had seen unknown threats before: rogue AI clusters, spatial anomalies, border skirmishes exaggerated by nervous commanders. Nothing that truly threatened core civilizations had appeared in centuries. Until the footage arrived. Not transmitted by the coalition. It simply appeared in public broadcast channels. Every empire, every system, every military command hub. Simultaneously, the first frame showed a patrol fleet in formation. The second showed the same fleet drifting powerless. The third showed the unknown warship sitting calmly at its center like a judgment-given form. And then the messages began. We hear you. You are escalating without comprehension. This is correction. Entire Senate halls went silent as the recordings looped. Diplomats leaned closer to screens, refusing to believe what they were seeing. Military analysts froze mid-sentence, unable to reconcile data with known physics. This is propaganda, one admiral said instantly. It's a psychological operation, some rival empire attempting destabilization. But even as he spoke, the tactical display beside him updated. The coalition fleet was still online. Barely. Systems marked inactive across multiple ships. No battle damage. No wreckage. Just shutdowns. Then the real shock hit. The unknown vessel was identified in sensor echoes extracted from corrupted logs. Not as a faction, not as a designation, but as a label that made no sense in any galactic language. Human. The word spread through command networks like a virus. Humans, a species most empires considered minor historical noise, a short-lived civilization that had vanished from recorded space cycles ago. Some believed they had been absorbed into larger empires. Others thought they had self-destructed before achieving interstellar relevance. No one considered them important enough to study deeply. Now, that dismissal felt like a mistake that might cost the galaxy everything. Cross-reference human records, demanded High Chancellor Vial of the Orden Dominion. The archivists complied, and found nothing useful. Only fragments, old exploration logs, ancient contact attempts, outdated xenobiology notes, all ending the same way. No significant expansion capability detected. No advanced military presence observed. Low threat classification. Low threat. The Chancellor laughed once sharply, then stopped when no one joined him. Because across every screen in the chamber, the human ship replayed its actions. Fleet shutdowns, weapons failing, ships frozen mid-combat. And the message: this is correction. Somewhere deep inside the Dominion command structure, an analyst whispered something no one wanted to hear aloud. If this is correction, what were they correcting for? The question hung unanswered. Because new data was arriving faster than it could be processed. Additional sightings. Not fleets. Not invasions. Just the same single warship. Appearing at the edge of multiple territories simultaneously. Impossible locations, impossible timing, impossible silence. No hyperspace signatures. No gate usage. No detectable transit method. It simply appeared, observed, and left. Always leaving systems temporarily quiet. Not destroyed. Not conquered. Silenced. Then the panic truly began. Military coalitions formed overnight. Ancient rivalries were ignored. Emergency summits convened between empires that had not spoken in millennia. The phrase Human Threat Response Protocol was activated for the first time in recorded history. But even as fleets mobilized, a deeper fear spread. Because every simulation ended the same way. Engagement failure. Resistance ineffective. Containment impossible. And worst of all, no one could predict what the human warship wanted. Until a final broadcast arrived. Not to governments. Not to fleets. But to every civilian system in the galaxy. Homes, markets, educational hubs, entertainment grids. Every screen lit up. And the message was simple. You are not safe because you are strong. You are safe because we have not decided otherwise. The galaxy froze. For the first time in recorded history, entire civilizations stopped speaking at once. Because the message wasn't a threat. It was a reminder. And somewhere in the silence that followed, as fleets rushed toward unknown coordinates and empires tried to prepare for something they still didn't understand, one truth settled into every mind. The humans were not invading. They were already here. And they were deciding, in real time, what the galaxy would be allowed to become next. The galaxy did what it always did when confronted with the incomprehensible. It searched for answers in the past. Archives long sealed were opened under emergency authorization. Data vaults older than some empires were decrypted. Forgotten observation posts, relic listening stations, and deep space survey logs were reactivated. Every major civilization wanted the same thing. Proof that this was not real. That the human warship was an anomaly, a weapon, a trick, anything except what the footage suggested. But the deeper they dug, the worse it became. Because humanity had been here before. Long before the Triarch Coalition existed. Long before the current galactic borders were drawn. Humanity had once been a known species. A minor one, contained to a small cluster of star systems on the galactic fringe. Energetic, ambitious, but statistically insignificant compared to the older empires that surrounded them. Then, abruptly, they disappeared from active records. No war announcement, no extinction event, no collapse signal. Just silence. At the time, it had been classified as civilizational fade-out, a polite term used when species stopped responding and were assumed to have burned out internally. No one investigated further. There had been no reason to. Now that negligence felt like staring into a black hole and realizing it had been growing in plain sight. The first breakthrough came from a fractured relay station near a dead star system. Its logs were incomplete, corrupted by time and radiation, but still partially readable. A coalition linguist spent hours reconstructing the fragments. Until a phrase emerged. Humanity has entered non-contact development phase. The linguist paused. Non-contact development. That was not a collapse. That was a choice. Further reconstruction revealed more. Humanity had not gone extinct. They had withdrawn, deliberately, from all external communication, trade, exploration, and diplomatic exchange. Entire sectors once mapped as human territory had been quietly abandoned, not destroyed, not conquered. Empty, like a hand slowly closing into a fist and then disappearing behind a curtain. Why would a species do that? Someone asked during the emergency council. No one answered immediately. Because the implications were uncomfortable. Isolation suggested preparation. And preparation suggested expectation. Expectation of something coming. Then another archive surfaced. Older, pre-coalition. A reconnaissance drone recovered from a long-forgotten border skirmish zone. Its memory core, though degraded, contained a final partial transmission. It showed a human research outpost. Active, not abandoned, not destroyed, just silent. The drone had recorded something unusual. Humans observing the galaxy. Not through telescopes, but through models, simulations, predictive systems far beyond known computational capability. The reconstructed audio fragment contained a single recovered sentence. If we continue interacting, we will become part of their cycle. The linguist reading the report stopped. Cycle, he asked. No one had an answer. But the pattern was becoming clearer. Humanity had not isolated itself out of weakness. They had isolated themselves to avoid something. Or someone. As more data came in, a disturbing timeline emerged. Human technological acceleration did not slow after isolation. It increased. Exponentially. No outside interference. No shared knowledge exchange. And yet their progress charts bent upward in ways that violated all known models of civilizational growth. Energy manipulation beyond containment limits. Spatial engineering without detectable infrastructure. Computational systems that did not rely on physical hardware in any traditional sense. One analyst finally spoke what others were afraid to articulate. They weren't hiding. They were evolving without constraint. Silence followed, because evolution without constraint did not produce stability. It produced divergence. And divergence from known physics was not something the galaxy had tools to understand. Then came the final recovered fragment. Encrypted, protected, hidden within a collapsed data vault buried under layers of decoy archives. When decrypted, it contained a single recovered human message. No timestamp. No sender ID. Just 4 words. Let them underestimate us. The council chamber went still. Because those words changed everything. Underestimation was not accidental. It was strategy, which meant humanity had been aware of the galaxy's perception of them. Aware of being dismissed, ignored, erased from strategic concern, and had chosen to allow it. For centuries. One admiral leaned forward, voice barely steady. So they let us forget them, on purpose. A strategist slowly nodded. Yes. A heavier silence followed. Then the realization hit harder than any fleet report. If humanity had been growing all this time, unseen, unchallenged, unmeasured, then every calculation the galaxy had ever made about balance of power, technological parity, and existential threat levels was based on incomplete data. And now that missing variable had returned. Not as a survivor, not as a refugee, but as something that had been waiting to be noticed. And somewhere far beyond the edge of mapped space, the human warship drifted silently through the void, its presence no longer an anomaly, but a signal. A signal that something that had been growing in the dark was finally ready to be seen. The coalition did not send fleets this time. They sent diplomacy, because war had stopped making sense. Three species, once rivals for border control, now stood together in a single emergency delegation chamber aboard the neutral station Asterin Reach. Every corridor was armed, every deck monitored, every communication channel encrypted and triple verified. Still, no one felt safe, because safety required understanding. And no one understood what they were dealing with. The human warship had not attacked since the last engagement. It had not expanded its presence. It had not claimed territory. It simply appeared at unpredictable points across monitored space, observing systems, then leaving without trace. That behavior terrified the strategists most of all. Predators hunted. Weapons conquered. But observers learned. And learning implied preparation. The delegation finally received contact authorization. The signal arrived not through the station's communication array, but directly into the central chamber display. No handshake protocol, no authentication sequence, just activation. The lights dimmed. A human appeared. He was not imposing, not armored, not alien in appearance. In fact, that was what unsettled the room the most. He looked ordinary. Calm posture, tired eyes, no visible augmentation, no weapons. Just presence. The coalition speaker forced composure. State your purpose. Your vessel has violated multiple sovereign zones and caused destabilization across 12 sectors. The human studied them quietly. Then spoke. You still think in zones. The words landed heavier than intended. A pause followed. Then the coalition speaker tightened their grip. You will answer the question. The human exhaled softly, almost like disappointment rather than defiance. No, he said, we will show you. The chamber display shifted. Suddenly, the room was no longer in the station. They were observing a star system. Two empires in full-scale war. Planetary bombardments, orbital strikes, civilian evacuations failing, entire fleets tearing through each other in coordinated destruction. The coalition delegation stiffened. This is an active conflict zone, someone said. We are already tracking. Watch, the human interrupted. And then it happened. Time stopped. Not metaphorically. Literally. Missiles hung mid-flight like frozen lightning. Explosions paused mid-expansion. Ships suspended in perfect stillness. Even radiation patterns halted as if the universe had lost the instruction to continue. One delegate whispered, voice breaking. This is impossible. The human did not respond. Instead, he gestured slightly. The paused system shifted. Not destroyed. Not altered. Just corrected. Orbital trajectories realigned. Weapons systems deactivated. Fleet coordination networks dissolved. Command hierarchies collapsed into neutral state. No damage. No casualties. Just cessation. Then time resumed. But the war was gone. Both fleets drifted in confusion, their weapons offline, their commands unresponsive, their aggression stripped away like a removed instinct. Silence filled the chamber. The delegation had no words. Finally, the coalition speaker managed. What did you do? The human looked at them directly. We removed escalation potential. Another pause. You interfered with sovereign conflict, the speaker said weakly. That is a violation of galactic law. The human tilted his head slightly. What law permits extinction events? No answer came. Because none existed. The display shifted again. Another system. Another war. Another collapse. Each one identical in outcome. Conflict interrupted, systems neutralized, violence rendered inert without destruction. Then the human spoke again. We are not here to defeat you. A quiet breath. We are here to ensure you stop becoming what you always become. The coalition speaker's voice cracked slightly. And what do we always become? The human paused. Then answered. Late. The chamber went still. No one asked for clarification. Because somewhere in their minds, they already understood. Too late to prevent war. Too late to stop escalation. Too late to recognize danger before it matured. The human stepped closer to the projection, his tone softer now. You build civilizations that only learn after collapse thresholds. You optimize survival after damage is done. You respond to extinction, never to probability. He looked at them directly. We are correcting the interval. The display faded, and the delegation was back in the chamber. Breathing, shaken, silent. Then alarms across the station suddenly activated. Every screen flashed red. Incoming unidentified object. No multiple objects. Hundreds. No detection vectors. No jump signatures. Just arrivals. A technician screamed from the control console. They're not entering the system. His voice trembled. They're already inside it. And as the delegation turned toward the observation viewport, every one of them saw it at the same time. Dozens of human warships now drifting silently around the station. Waiting, not attacking, not moving, just positioned, like a lesson not yet concluded. And in the center of them all, the original warship, still, watching, as if the demonstration had only just begun. No empire admitted fear. Not publicly, but fear had already rewritten the galaxy's behavior. Trade routes shifted overnight. Military formations tightened into defensive spirals. Entire border systems were evacuated under maintenance protocols. The Triarch Coalition issued statements about unknown anomalies requiring observation, but no one believed it anymore. They were not observing. They were waiting for humanity to decide what came next. And that was the most terrifying part, because humanity had stopped behaving like a conqueror. They behaved like a force responding to something already broken. Then it happened. The Hellion ascendancy broke protocol. They had never trusted the coalition, never followed unified doctrine, and they had built their empire on one principle: dominance through decisive force. To them, the human presence was unacceptable. An insult, a challenge, so they responded the only way they knew how. They launched everything. A full military convergence. 12 battle fleets, 7 carrier groups, dozens of Dread-class siege vessels, planetary ignition platforms charged and ready. It was not a defense force. It was an execution attempt. Their target was simple: the human warship. The galaxy watched in stunned silence as the Hellion armada translated into real space at the edge of monitored human presence. One by one, ships emerged from slipspace corridors, forming a crescent of overwhelming firepower. Sensors confirmed it immediately. Mass superiority, absolute. Firepower advantage, overwhelming. Victory probability, guaranteed. At least according to every known model. On every coalition station, commanders leaned forward. "This is it," someone whispered. "We finally see their limits." But the human warship did not move, did not reposition, did not react. It simply remained there, centered, still, as if waiting for something inevitable. Hellion Admiral Kirsch broadcast a final ultimatum. "Unknown vessel, you have interfered in sovereign conflicts and violated sacred space boundaries. Surrender your technology and submit for containment." No response came. The silence stretched. Then Kirsch gave the order. Fire. The galaxy lit up. A synchronized volley of destruction unlike anything seen in recorded history erupted from the Hellion fleet. Starburn beams, relativistic slugs, quantum disruptors, gravity collapse warheads. Space itself seemed to ignite. For a brief, hopeful moment, some believed, even the coalition, that nothing could survive such concentrated force. Then reality broke. Not exploded. Not collapsed. Broke, like glass under invisible pressure. The incoming armada froze mid-trajectory. Every weapon discharge halted in motion. Every missile suspended. every energy beam locked into place like painted light. The entire battlefield became still, not frozen by time, but by absence of permission to continue. Admiral Kersh stared at the display. "What is happening?" he whispered. A systems officer trembled. "Our weapons, they're still active, but the outputs aren't resolving." Another voice panicked. "Navigation is locked, we can't retreat." Then the human warship finally moved. Not toward them, not away, but through them. Space folded, not as a collapse, as a correction of structure. Ships did not explode. They did not burn. They simply ceased to occupy positions they had previously held. Entire sections of the Hellion Armada vanished from formation, as if removed from a diagram by an unseen hand. No debris, no radiation spike, no distress signals, just emptiness. Admiral Kersh fell silent. Then the human message arrived. Not across channels, but inside every remaining Hellion command system. "You crossed a boundary you did not perceive." Kersh's hands trembled. We followed engagement doctrine, we." The message continued. "You assumed scale-determined outcome." Another pause. "It does not." And then, a final update appeared on every surviving screen. A simple diagram. Hellion fleet structure. Before and after. Before, overwhelming force. After, reduced to scattered fragments drifting powerless in deep space. Systems intact but unresponsive, weapons permanently inert. Kersh whispered, barely audible. "This isn't war." A crew member finished it for him. "It's subtraction." The human warship reappeared at the center of the wreckage field. Still, quiet, observing the remains of the fleet without urgency or satisfaction. Then a new transmission arrived, this one broadcast across all surviving Hellion channels, coalition relay stations, and neutral empire networks. This was not punishment. This was a demonstration of limits. Kersh closed his eyes, because now he understood something deeply humiliating. They had not been destroyed because they were strong. They had been removed because they were irrelevant to the system humanity operated within. And in that realization came the final horror. If this was what happened when they crossed a line, then humanity had not yet begun responding to true hostility. They had only responded to curiosity. And somewhere beyond the shattered Hellion fleet, the human warship remained in position, waiting, as if watching to see which empire would be the first to realize the most dangerous truth of all. They had not provoked a war. They had only been granted the opportunity to stop being a problem. And that opportunity was running out. The galaxy expected conquest. It expected occupation, expansion, demands, something familiar enough to fight against or negotiate with. Instead, humanity did something worse. They explained. The message arrived without warning across every major network, not as an emergency broadcast, but as a synchronized system override. Military channels, civilian grids, diplomatic frequencies, all of them dimmed simultaneously until only one voice remained. The human. But this time there was no demonstration, no display of power, no interruption of physics. Just words. "We were like you," the human began. The statement alone caused confusion across command centers. Like us, the galaxy's dominant empires had built themselves on centuries of superiority. Even their conflicts were framed as contests between advanced civilizations. To equate themselves with a long-vanished minor species felt almost insulting. But no one interrupted, because interrupting was no longer safe. The human continued. "We expanded, we fought. We divided ourselves into systems of belief, territory, and survival logic. We assumed progress meant growth in all directions." Images appeared behind him. Human history. Not the sanitized versions found in galactic archives, but raw sequences. Global wars, collapsing ecosystems, orbital weapons, civil unrest, extinction-level crises narrowly avoided. Every empire watching recognized something uncomfortable. Not alien behavior. Familiar behavior. The human voice softened slightly. We reached a point where continuation meant destruction. Not immediate collapse, but guaranteed trajectory failure. A pause. We called it the convergence problem. On screen, equations and models appeared, civilization growth curves intersecting with extinction probability graphs. No translation was needed. Even non-human intelligences processed it instantly. "You were watching us?" a coalition scientist whispered. "Yes," the human replied, as if answering directly. That admission froze entire systems. "You saw us vanish," he continued. "But we did not vanish, we stepped out of interaction space." A new image appeared. Humanity withdrawing from external contact networks, star systems going dark, communication nodes shutting down one by one, not due to failure, but design. We stopped feeding into external cycles of escalation. The galaxy listened. Because that phrase, external cycles of escalation, matched something every empire had lived through. Wars that never truly ended. Conflicts that stabilized only temporarily. Borders that always shifted back toward violence. The human looked up. But we continued developing. Now the tone changed. Sharper, more distant. Without interference, without comparison, without competition-based progress metrics. Images shifted again. Technologies the galaxy had never seen. Energy systems that bent probability fields. Computational architectures that did not rely on hardware clusters. Spatial manipulation without observable energy expenditure. Entire ships existing as phase-stable constructs rather than matter-bound objects. One admiral whispered, "That violates everything." No one corrected him. Because it clearly did. The human stepped slightly forward in the projection. And then we looked back. A pause. "At you." The galaxy stiffened. Every empire, every coalition, every civilization felt that pause land like weight. "We did not see enemies," he said. Another pause. We saw ourselves before correction failure. Silence stretched. Then the truth was spoken. We returned not because we wanted territory. The image shifted to the human warship. Not as a weapon, but as a marker. A boundary indicator. We returned because your systems were converging toward the same failure state we once experienced. The coalition leadership exchanged uneasy glances. "You are saying," one finally said carefully, "that you intervened because we are heading toward extinction." The human did not deny it. But he did not agree either. Instead, he answered differently. "We are saying your probability curves are unbounded." That phrase triggered alarm across analytic systems. Unbounded instability meant unpredictable collapse. No recovery trajectory. No equilibrium point. Just escalation without constraint. The human continued. And you do not see it because you normalize escalation as progress. A long silence followed. Then the human added something quieter. "We did too." That sentence landed differently. Not as accusation. As confession. The projection shifted again. Now showing humanity's own past threshold moment. The point where their civilization had almost collapsed under its own acceleration. "We corrected ourselves," he said. "And we are here because we recognize the same shape in you." Across the galaxy, no one spoke. Because it was no longer about power. It was about reflection. The human warship appeared again in the projection, surrounded by silent space, not advancing, not attacking. Then the final statement came. "We are not your rulers." A pause. "We are your second trajectory." And then the transmission ended. Not with threat, not with instruction, but with absence. Every screen went dark. Every channel restored. Every empire returned to its own silence. But nothing felt normal anymore. Because the galaxy had just learned something it could not unlearn. Humanity had not returned to conquer. They had returned to measure. And somewhere beyond the edge of known space, the human warship remained in orbit, waiting not for resistance, but for the first civilization brave enough to ask the question no empire wanted to face. What happens if they decide we cannot be corrected? For the first time in recorded galactic history, silence became policy. Not the silence of ignorance, not the silence of fear alone, but the silence of civilizations actively trying not to provoke reality into responding. Across the Triarch coalition, war doctrines were rewritten overnight. Entire offensive branches were dissolved. Weapons development programs were suspended under Stability Review Acts. Even the Hellion remnants, what little remained of their shattered armadas, were quietly reassigned to border monitoring rather than expansion. No one admitted surrender. But expansion stopped, and that alone changed the shape of the galaxy. The human warship remained in orbit at the edge of coalition space. Still, unmoving. It did not patrol. It did not demand tribute. It did not enforce territory. It simply existed like a fixed point in an equation no one wanted to solve incorrectly again. Scientists tried to study it. They failed. Every attempt to gather consistent data resulted in contradictions. Sensor readings disagreed with themselves. Visual feeds lagged reality by unpredictable intervals. Even synchronized multi-system observations produced mismatched results. One researcher finally summarized it in exhaustion. It behaves like it knows we are watching. That statement was never officially recorded, because it was too unsettling. Meanwhile, across the galaxy, something unexpected happened. Wars ended. Not through treaties, not through victory, but through hesitation. Two fleets preparing for border conflict simply did not engage. Commanders refused escalation authorization. Resource disputes were redirected into arbitration systems that, for once, actually resolved outcomes peacefully. It was not peace born of trust. It was peace born of consequence awareness. And humanity did nothing to enforce it. They did not intervene. They did not enforce compliance. They simply observed, which somehow made it more effective. Then, without warning, another broadcast arrived. But this time it was not global. It was targeted. Every major capital world received a localized transmission. No universal override, no forced synchronization. Just a presence in their systems, like a knock on a closed door. The human appeared again. Calm, same expression, same voice. But something had changed. Less explanation. More finality. "You have stabilized," he said. A pause. "That is acceptable." The coalition representatives exchanged glances. "Acceptable," one repeated. The human nodded slightly. "Your escalation rates have decreased. Your conflict prediction models now trend toward containment rather than expansion." Another pause. "But you are still fragile." That word hit harder than any weapon report ever had. Fragile, not weak, not doomed, just unstable enough to break again under pressure. A diplomat finally spoke, carefully. "Are you saying your intervention will continue indefinitely?" The human looked at them for a long moment, then answered honestly, "No." That single word caused immediate confusion. The human continued, "We do not maintain control structures." A pause. "We correct divergence events, then we withdraw." The implication spread slowly. "So you leave?" the coalition asked. "Yes." Another pause. "And return only when necessary." The chamber went still, because that meant something terrifying. The human warship was not occupation. It was intermittent intervention. A correction system that appeared only when reality drifted too far from acceptable bounds. One admiral finally asked the question no one wanted to hear answered. "And who defines acceptable?" The human did not respond immediately. For the first time, there was hesitation. Not uncertainty. But wait. Then he answered, "We do." Silence, not outrage, not resistance, just understanding settling like dust. Because no empire could argue with the outcome that had already been demonstrated. No fleet had survived engagement. No system had resisted correction. No simulation had predicted success. The human continued, softer now. We are not here to rule you. A pause. We are here so you do not become what we failed to prevent in ourselves. The projection dimmed slightly. And when you no longer require correction. A longer pause. We will leave entirely. The transmission ended. This time there was no shock. Only contemplation. Days passed. Then weeks. The human warship remained. But it did not move. It did not intervene. It did not speak again. And slowly, something unexpected began to spread across the galaxy. Not fear. Not worship. Not rebellion. But restraint. Empires began building differently. Not larger. Not faster. But more carefully. Scientific advancements were reviewed not only for capability, but consequence. Military expansions required predictive stability modeling. Even exploration missions began including impact forecast protocols. The galaxy was changing. Not because it had been conquered, but because it had been seen clearly for the first time. And the most unsettling realization of all began to form quietly across every civilization. The humans had not come to end them. They had come to ensure they would not need to be ended later. And in the center of it all, silent above the shifting tides of a newly cautious galaxy, the human warship remained. Not as a threat, not as a ruler, but as a reminder that somewhere out there existed a species that had already made its worst mistakes and decided the universe would not be allowed to repeat them unchecked.